Welcome to session 2 of Avantiico's Dynamics 365 Finance Automation webinar series. My name is Aaron Klein. I'm the marketing manager here at Avantiico, and with me today is our featured speaker for this session, D365 finance consultant Ann Benson. Now, today's session focuses on the D365 AP Automation and OCR module, where you'll learn how to streamline your accounts payable processes by automating data entry, eliminating errors, reducing delays and disputes, and enabling real-time insights with enhanced data accuracy. Now, Anne will break down the full session agenda momentarily, but before she does, just wanted to share with you a few of our other webinars that we have either coming up or have just hosted, right? So, of course, today, like I said, is session 2 of our 3-part finance automation series. Session 1 was on the D365 credit and collections module, covering how to enhance efficiency by automating the collections process to effectively manage late payments and minimize payment backlogs without additional software costs. The recording for this session is available on our website, and I'll put the link in chat for that momentarily. And then 2 weeks from now, on October 8th, we'll be hosting session 3 of this series, focused on advanced bank reconciliation, where you'll learn how to utilize new features for generating customer payment transactions directly from bank statements, accelerate reconciliation with automated matching rules, and increase confidence in your bank balances and cash forecasting with timely account reconciliations. And then don't forget, of course, we have a library of all of our past webinars on avantiico.com underneath the Insights tab. Sessions include best practices for Microsoft One version updates, D365 licensing best practices, and then there's a whole series around our 3PL automation cloud ISV solution, as well as the multi-company automation solution. And again, I'll put the links to all of these in the chat. That's really the intro, but Anne, from there, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Aaron. Hello, everyone. My name's Ann Benson, and I'll be your presenter today. I have been working with Dynamics 365 AX finance area for over 20 years. And then I specialize in our OCR AP automation, which we're going to demonstrate today. So let's go ahead and get started. Our agenda for today, we're going to go through some of the configuration and setup. We won't hit all of it, but we'll hit some good portion of it and the main points. I'll give you a demonstration of how invoice capture works, and then from there we're going to set up the and configure the AP payment process to automate your payment proposals, and then we will do a end-to-end demonstration where it goes straight from invoice capture and then through to our payment proposal. If you have any questions, feel free to jump out and ask as we go along. Otherwise, you can put some into the chat and we can get to those questions at the end of the session. All right, so the way invoice capture works is the first time requires the manual intervention. There are multiple ways that an invoice can come into invoice capture. It can either come in via email, it can be manually uploaded, or come in from a OneDrive or SharePoint file location. And the invoice comes in, and if you have multiple legal entities, you assign it to the appropriate legal entity. You start the review, you make any corrections on the invoice, you complete the review, you transfer it to D365. Usually by the second time that type of invoice comes in again, it automatically knows which legal entity it should go to. It derives all the vendor accounts. It looks at the item or expense type. If it's relating to a PO, processes it through to D365. All right, so in configuring it, you first have to enable invoice capture in the features. In order for it to start up. And then once it does, and I'll show you when we get to D365, you'll see an invoice capture button on the screen to easily access invoice capture. You can select which companies, legal entities that you want to use invoice capture for. So if you have multiple legal entities, but only 2 or 3 out of your 7 are coming in with high volume invoices, you might only select those 3 to be used, as the other ones are not as high in volume, so you can just leave those out of the invoice capture. And then you have to assign security roles. Now, security roles are both in the invoice capture side and on the D365 side. So for the D365 side, you have to assign the invoice capture operator role so that you can actually see what's in invoice capture. On the invoice capture side, you also assign 2 AP roles so that you can access it. And then there's additional roles if you are the person who's going to manage invoice capture and create more configurations. That's a different role setting. And then last but not least, you have to create a couple workflows to process through for either your pending invoices or your invoice journal. So everything can go straight from invoice capture to into D365, and then the payment process, or sorry, the invoice process can go through a workflow. So just to recap, download, install, assign your roles, and then configure your legal entities and vendor mapping roles, and then different filters. So let's go ahead and go into, let me get rid of this here real quick. We'll go into our invoice capture here. So this is our invoice capture. This is the first screen that will come up when you are logging in, and this is your dashboard. This will give you information of how many have been transferred into D365, how many are sitting in review. There are different statuses, and this will collect that information so you can come in and look to see where you're at each time you log in. The first thing you do is receive files. So this is where I was talking about where you can have 3 different ways: your email, your file from a OneDrive, SharePoint, or you can manually upload the files. To save a little time, I did upload one that we're going to look at, but when we process all the way through, I'll show you how they're uploaded. So the first invoice I actually created so that it would error out intentionally, so we could look at the process here. So I have this invoice that came through, and this is for a type PO invoice. There are 3 different invoice types that you can use to process through. One being the PO invoice, one being just the header, and the other one is they call it the cost invoice. The cost invoice is what will be transferred to the invoice journal, as opposed to pending invoices that relate to POs. So when you first come into invoice capture, you classify the invoice. So by classifying, you select which legal entity, which vendor, and what type of invoice it's going to be. And this one is related to a PO. So it found my vendor and it found my legal entity. So I'll just save and close that. And And then you want to start to look through to see what errors you have. And up here at the top, it tells me how many errors I have, how many warnings I have, and it lists all the error messages for this invoice. So right now it says no item assigned. So when it came through, it saw a line description of 1,000. That is actually my item number. So I'm going to go over to item numbers and I will select that. And once I tab through, you can see that it was manually changed and it is now correct. Up here, it did find my PO number, which is listed here. And it's given my invoice number, gives my vendor name, date and due date, and then our total amount and what currency it's in. And that's the header part of the purchase order. And down here in the lines, it tells me my quantity. It automatically populated because I have 3 and a unit price of 450, which is there's my unit price, and then my total amount. Now, for my purchase order, I have to select this on the lines, and the reason is because when my PO when the invoice came in, it didn't have an item number. So even though it related to a PO, it couldn't relate the lines to that PO because it didn't know what invoice number to use. So at this point, I would select, and I would select my line here, and then I would say, okay, and I'd confirm it. Now, if you look up at the top, I have 0 errors. So this one is ready to be transferred over. Okay, let me quick go back into D365 here and show you. Oh, let me start some of these up. So as I discussed before, once you enable the feature here, Invoice Capture appears as one of the apps listed, which you can click on and then go into Invoice Capture. I already have it set up, so I'm not going to click. When Invoice Capture processes through, it goes through different background processes to validate the pending invoice. So it matches the invoice to the invoice receipts, or to the purchase order receipts, sorry. It submits the invoice to the workflow. I have it set right now to transfer our invoices every minute from Invoice Capture over to D365, and we're validating the matching every minute also. So these are already set up in the system. You don't have to set them up. I will note that some of these are an hour, and you can't change that. So if you process a pending vendor invoice over, and you're waiting for it to match product receipts and to the PO, it goes in an hour interval, and they did that for performance reasons, so they won't let you change it to every minute. It runs hourly for that one and for submitting the invoices to workflow. So just give you a heads up on that. I have created 2 vendors here that will be using Z100 and Z200. These are the 2 invoices that we're going to be using in the demo today. Our waste management is just a invoice journal type invoices that come in. And then our supplies for you is our PO invoice. On the waste management, vendor account. What I have done is set up default accounts so that when the invoice is transferred over to the invoice journal, my accounts are already pre-populated. So I don't have to go in and select the ledger account for that invoice or the dimensions as I set the dimensions up. Well, let's go back here. On the vendor account itself, I have my dimensions set up. So those two will automatically default. So if you have a vendor where you know it's going to the same GL account every time and it's not a PO vendor, you can automatically set those up so that you don't have to do any entry within the invoice journal. All right. And then my other supplies one is just for POs, so I did not set any default accounts on or financial dimensions. Okay. Let's go through real quick. Now I have processed these two invoices already. So the system has already learned where they should go and what they should be. So I am going to bring in one of our waste management invoices and one of our POs. So I can just click in the plus and then select from my C drive, wherever your files are located, and upload them manually. It is restrictive to what type of file types it'll take for the invoices. You have these listed here. PDF is usually the most common. There are some JPEGs that are brought in. It does not use, it cannot read Word or Excel. So let me upload these. And once I upload it, it tells me that it's been complete and two of them were uploaded. And when I come in, I see that one of them is already waiting. This one, my file size was a little too big, so I'm going to have them retry that. So we're in a state of waiting. As I refresh, the state will move from waiting to processing. And once it goes from received files, it'll end up in your captured invoices. So let me refresh. Now it's processing, and it'll process through. This does take a minute, but this is part of the automation where when your invoice comes in, if it's coming in through email, it will automatically wait and go through the processing into captured invoices. I don't want to miss the process from when it goes from received to captured invoices. So just going to refresh here. Okay. So now you see that both of those are in processing status and are captured invoices. It is looking through each one, determining what information it goes to, what legal entity, what vendor, and it's processing those through. And the waiting still process, you can see it's already assigned my legal entity to it. So far, no errors. I did get a warning here, though. So we'll see if it has to check that out. You can set your levels for warning, and I will show you that real quick. Oops. you can determine whether you want to use that confidence score, and that's where it allows you to determine how long of or which ones should be warned and which ones you want it to air out based on a percentage. So if the system thinks that it's 30% correct, uh, it will give a warning based on your confidence score setup. So if I said, yeah, if it's anything under 50%, just put it as a warning. Anything over 50%, I can tell the system, put that as an error because I want to look at it. So you can set different confidence score levels. I just want to switch back real quick to see if we have processed. All right. So as you notice, both of them are gone. They automatically transferred into D365. Um, because the system has been trained, it looked at the invoices and processed them all the way through. So if we come back into D365, we'll start with the invoice journal. So this should be my waste management journal. And down here at the bottom, this is who put it in. It comes over in as admin because it automatically processed through without anybody touching it. It uses the admin as the user defined. My offset account automatically populated. It gives me my invoice number, my invoice date, my amount. It has chosen my vendor. All I have to do is post. And there it is. My invoice is now ready to be paid. So there's there's really no hands-on except for posting does not happen automatically as far as the journal goes. But if I wanted to, I could put in a workflow, and once this comes over, it could automatically submit to the workflow and process through to get the approvals that are needed. Just for time's sake, I didn't set up any workflow processes. But you can have it go all the way through to workflow to the approval and then post the invoice. So I know I went through that pretty quickly, but before I go into the pending vendor invoices, is there any questions regarding the straight AP invoice journal on um, capturing invoices that way? And feel free to speak out and or just put in the chat and I can answer them later. Okay, moving along, let's go into the pending vendor invoices. So now I should see one for my vendor for supplies to you. I'm just going to filter that vendor out. So here it is, and my last match status has not been performed, or my receipt match status has not been performed. And the reason why is because, as I discussed before, in here for our processing, those are set for an hour. So what I'm going to do is cheat and backdate those so that we can process them through a little quicker. So just give me one moment and I will backdate these so we don't have to wait an hour. Okay, so we'll let those catch up for a minute. And while that is, workflows are running in the background and processing those through, I want to show you a little bit of the setup on the invoice capture side here in D365. You saw my screenshots, and as we went through, we could determine which legal entities we wanted to use the invoice capture for. Currently, I'm just using the standard USMF. The sync all vendors. When this is checked, anytime a new vendor is synced or is entered, it will automatically sync over to the invoice capture side. The vendors have to be listed in an invoice capture in order for it to match up what is on your invoice that is brought in to D365. So if you check the box, then every time a new vendor is entered in, it will automatically sync to invoice capture. I don't know the exact time frame, but it usually happens within a few minutes that it's already updated with all the vendors. Okay. And then you have the transfer attachment. So every time the invoice is scanned in and transferred from invoice capture over to D365, the invoice comes with it. And I can show you that with our pending vendor invoice. If you look up in the corner, excuse me, you'll see a number 1 on the attachment icons, and that's showing that the invoice has come over. I can click on that, view our attachment, and it shows you a preview of the invoice that I uploaded and was brought over. So all the attachments, and it does that for the invoice journal too. It brings over all the invoices with each transfer to D365. Now you can see that my match status has ran, it passed, it's completed. At this point, I could actually post it, and it will go straight onto the vendor's account. What I find most typically is that pending invoices that come through are going to go through a workflow. So typically you can automatically set up that so that when it transfers over, it automatically starts the workflow and sends it on. If it was a header PO type invoice, then it would come here and wouldn't process through workflow, as you would need to still populate the information on the invoice to match the PO. And the reason why people use header POs is like sometimes they don't know what's going to be on their PO for, you send out a PO for some maintenance repair. And that invoice comes in and then tells you, yes, here's wiring and here's my hours of service and, any type of maintenance work they've done might be on individual lines within the invoice, but you don't know what they're going to do ahead of time, but you do have a PO created for it. So you can use the invoice header type to transfer over, and then it obviously it's not going to match because it doesn't have the lines yet. And then once you get that information, you can populate the PO and then match up your invoice with the PO. All right, so this one has been, it passed, it completed. All I have to do is post. And on your workflows, when you send through workflows, your workflows can be set up for automatic posting. So that once it's approved and it's gone through the workflow, it could post for you automatically. Once it's posted, it's removed from here, the pending invoices, and put on the vendor's account ready to be paid. Okay, are there any questions regarding PO invoices? Let me look at the chat here. No questions so far. Awesome. All right. Okay, the last thing I want to discuss is our process automation um, uh, for AP payments. So within this, there's some setup that needs to be configured. You have to enable sorry, wrong one. Skipped on me. All right. You have to set up the payment process automation, and from there, generates a payment proposal. So it looks just like when you're running a payment proposal on what options you have. So let's go into our process automations. All right, I have one currently set up for checks. So let's create a new one, and let's vendor payment proposal. I'll create a series. We'll name this ACH. So not going through all the fields, but you can schedule a time for when you want this to run. So if you process ACHs every day, you can have it run, so that when you come in the morning, at 8 a.m. that this is a payment proposal is sitting out there for you, right? Um, to review and then process through. I can tell when I want this to start. So we'll start it today, but actually we'll put 12 and we'll go 35. Oops. And we'll leave it at PM. And then how often do you want it to repeat? I said we're going to do it daily, and I want every day of the week. You can have alerts sent once it's ended, or if it got canceled, if there was some error, you can have emails, or you can do a pop-up. So it can notify you when this is processed. All right, and what journal do I want it to go to? I want it to go to my payment journal. How do I want my invoices selected? Here, I'm just going to go by due date. So this is, if you notice, this is all the same setup within the payment proposal. So it's just defining it for every time go through. So this is all going to be USD. And I want it to go to a bank with my offset to be the operating. Actually, I don't need minimum date. I don't want negative. And here into the filters, this is where I can select my method of payment so that I am only paying ACHs. So once all this is set up, you can click finish. And here's the one we did. And it will show you here to the side the days that it's going to run the proposal. And you see that Saturday and Sunday, they're not running the proposal because I select weekdays. That it's scheduled. What's it going to pull? It's going to pull ACHs from the USMF company and what time it's going to occur. And then if you wanted to, if you knew that you were going on vacation or something, and so you've paid out as much ACH in advance as you could actually come in and disable this so it doesn't generate the files or the payment journal for the next several days or for the week. You can disable, and it would just disable this day that you're looking at, not the entire series. Just to show you one, once it's ran and done, it'll give it a completed. While it's running, it will show a executing state, and for those that haven't ran yet, of course, they're just scheduled. So this one already completed. I must not have had very many ACHs out there. So let's take a quick look. If I go into my vendor payment journal, I have two. So I have two out there. Here is my waste management one that I have set up to run or process through the invoice capture. And then from here you can view it and then generate your payments and post. It does. It only creates the payment proposal as it doesn't process or generate the file or the payments. It gives you a chance to review everything to make sure this is what you're looking to pay based on the criteria you set up, which makes sense for checks and balances that you don't want it to just automatically send out payment and post. So you'll have to come in and generate the payments and then post the file. All right. Any questions there? I know I talk very fast and I've gone through it quickly, but I want to. So if you have a question or if you want to see something again, I'm more than happy to show it again. So there's end to end where I have gone through, coming through the invoice capture, and as you can see, it goes all the way through for like our waste management to the payment proposal. So you can go through without actually touching anything, although I did on the invoice journal I posted because I didn't have it go through workflow, all the way to the payment proposal and make the payment. All right, since I have a little bit of time, um, I'd like to go through some of the setup here in the invoice capture. Um, if, as you can see, you can, excuse me, in the system setup for the invoice capture, there's this manage vendors, and gives you a list of all the vendors that are out there. So if for some reason you entered in the invoice entered in the vendor and have an invoice already out here waiting for this vendor and it hasn't synced yet, you can actually do a manual sync where I sync all of them, say, okay, it goes through, looks to see which ones are missing, and then automatically updates. So if there is any type of lag between the vendor entry and the update within invoice capture, you can actually manually sync it to go faster.
And it looks like also did have a question about does it automatically mark the captured invoices for settlement on the payment journal?
Yes. Yes. So if I go into here, if I go into settled transactions, they are marked. So here's my invoice, my two invoices that came through for waste management, and they are marked for settlement. Is that okay? Just want to make sure I answered your question. All right. So let's go back here. Now, if I look at my dashboard, remember I uploaded 2, they processed. I went from 8 to 10 that were transferred. I still have 1 in review. That was the one I showed you for our Home Depot that I've updated and I did not save that when I updated. Oh, yes, I did. Line number 1 is mandatory. Oh, okay. Let me complete my review. Now I'm back to my 0. And then when you go to transfer, if you have to manually transfer like I did here to, because I had to update this, then you can click on the transfer invoice. And then the invoice has been fully transferred. Now, if I go back into pending vendor invoices, I am here. Let me refresh that. And then here is my Home Depot because it was PO 611. You can see it's not yet performed. I would have to cheat and redo the flow because or wait an hour before it processes through. But again, here's the attachment for the invoice and the pending invoice journals. Oops, wrong. Not pending. I want invoice journals. You can see here's the attachment for this journal. That's all I have. So if there's any questions, please shout out. Otherwise, I thank you very much for attending, and hopefully this has answered any questions you did have.